With Olivia standing motionless at the door, and Aaron, her stepbrother's best friend, perched on the side of the bed, the dim glow of the corridor spilt into the dimly lit guest room. There was strain in his low voice. "I can't stop thinking about you, but you don't have to say anything." The air between them was heavy with unspoken words, and she gasped as his penetrating stare met hers. Olivia already had to deal with tricky family relationships without her stepbrother Ethan's friends being around all the time. Aaron, however, was not your typical pal. Something about his sharp wit and quiet assurance stood out to her from the first time she met him. With Olivia standing motionless at the door and Aaron, her stepbrother's best friend, perched on the side of the bed, the dim glow of the corridor spilt into the dimly lit guest room. There was strain in his low voice. "I can't stop thinking about you, but you don't have to say anything." The air between them was heavy with unspoken words, and she gasped as his penetrating stare met hers. Olivia already had to deal with tricky family relationships without her stepbrother Ethan's friends being around all the time. Aaron, however, was not your typical pal. Something about his sharp wit and quiet assurance stood out to her from the first time she met him. "Still running on Aaron time?" Ethan teased, clapping him on the back. Aaron chuckled, his gaze flickering to Olivia for just a moment too long. "You know me," he replied, his grin as easy as ever. Olivia felt her cheeks flush as she quickly busied herself with setting the table. Throughout the evening, she couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes on her, a quiet intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Olivia found herself in the kitchen, unable to sleep. She was pouring herself a glass of water when she heard footsteps behind her. "Couldn't sleep either?" Aaron's voice was soft, almost hesitant. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, his arms crossed casually, but his expression serious. "Too much coffee," she replied with a faint smile. He walked over, leaning against the counter beside her. "This place is too quiet at night. Feels like something out of a horror movie." Olivia laughed, the sound breaking the tension in the room. "Maybe I should be the one scared then." Aaron's gaze lingered on her, his smile fading slightly. "I don't think you have anything to be scared of, Olivia." Her breath hitched at the way he said her name, his voice low and deliberate. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the unspoken stretching between them. Finally, Aaron broke the quiet. "Can I be honest with you?" he asked, his tone serious. Olivia frowned, her heart pounding. "About what?" He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "About how hard it's been to be around you and not say what I'm thinking, what I've been thinking for a long time." Her stomach twisted as his words sank in. "Aaron, I know it's wrong," he said quickly, his voice filled with frustration. "You're Ethan's sister, stepsister, but still, it doesn't change how I feel." Olivia stared at him, her thoughts racing. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I can't keep pretending I don't feel something for you," he admitted, his eyes locking onto hers. Her heart raced as she took a step back, needing space to process what he had just said. "Aaron, this is crazy," she whispered. "Maybe," he replied, stepping closer. "But it's the truth." Before she could respond, he reached out, his hand brushing hers. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her, and she couldn't bring herself to pull away. "This can't happen," she murmured, though her voice lacked conviction. "Then tell me to stop," he said, his gaze searching hers, "and I will." The words were on the tip of her tongue, but they wouldn't come. Instead, she stood frozen as Aaron leaned in, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was slow, deliberate, and filled with unspoken longing. The kiss deepened, their restraint crumbling as the tension between them boiled over. Aaron's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer as Olivia's fingers tangled in his hair. "You're impossible," she murmured against his lips, her voice trembling. "And you're everything I can't stop thinking about," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. The kitchen became their haven, the quiet house shielding them from the consequences of what they were doing. Every touch, every whispered word felt electric, a connection neither of them could deny. Just as their passion reached its peak, the sound of a door creaking open shattered the moment. Olivia pulled away, her heart racing as Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "What's going on here?" Ethan's voice was sharp, his gaze darting between them. Aaron stepped forward, his posture calm but his voice steady. "Ethan, I don't," Ethan interrupted, his tone cold. "Whatever this is, it stops now." Olivia's stomach churned as Ethan turned and walked away, leaving her and Aaron standing in stunned silence. As the house settled back into quiet, Aaron reached for her hand, his grip firm but comforting. "We'll figure this out," he said softly. Olivia nodded, her chest tightening. "But what if we can't?" "We will," he replied, his gaze steady, "because I'm not walking away from this." Whatever the future held, they both knew they had crossed a line that could never be undone, and the consequences were only just beginning. The hours following Ethan's abrupt discovery were filled with an unbearable tension that clung to every corner of the house. Olivia barely slept, her mind replaying the moment over and over. The look on Ethan's face, a mix of disbelief and betrayal, was etched into her memory. When morning came, she stayed in her room, hoping to avoid everyone. But as the smell of coffee wafted through the air, her stomach churned, reminding her she couldn't hide forever. Downstairs, the atmosphere was stifling. Ethan sat at the table, his expression cold and distant. Aaron was leaning against the counter, a cup of coffee in hand, his demeanor calm but his jaw tight. Olivia hesitated in the doorway, feeling the weight of their gazes on her as she stepped into the room. "Morning," she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan didn't respond, his eyes fixed on his phone. Aaron, however, moved toward her, his presence steady and reassuring. "Can we talk?" Aaron asked softly, his voice meant for her ears alone. Olivia nodded, glancing at Ethan, who didn't look up. Aaron led her out to the back porch, the cool morning air a sharp contrast to the suffocating tension inside. They stood in silence for a moment before he spoke. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. She looked up at him, her chest tightening. "I don't know, Ethan, he looked at me like I was a stranger." Aaron reached for her hand, his touch warm and grounding. "He'll come around," he said firmly. "He's just shocked. This isn't easy for any of us." Olivia nodded, though her doubt lingered. What if he doesn't? What if this ruins everything? Aaron stepped closer, his gaze steady. "It won't. We'll figure it out together no matter what." The rest of the day passed in strained silence. Ethan avoided both of them, retreating to his room or disappearing into the garage. Olivia felt the weight of his absence acutely, guilt gnawing at her with every passing hour. By evening, she couldn't take it anymore. She knocked on Ethan's door, her heart pounding. "Come in," he said flatly. She stepped inside, her stomach twisting at the sight of him sitting on the edge of his bed, his expression guarded. "Ethan, I'm so sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you." He looked at her, his eyes cold. "You didn't just hurt me, Olivia. You blindsided me. Aaron's supposed to be my best friend, and now?" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I don't even know what to think." She swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. "It wasn't planned, it just happened." "That's not an excuse," he snapped, his tone sharp. "I know," she said quickly, her voice breaking, "but it's the truth." That night, as the house settled into its usual quiet, Olivia found herself in the living room, unable to sleep. The glow of the fireplace cast flickering shadows across the walls as she sat curled up on the couch, lost in thought. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Aaron standing in the doorway. He didn't say anything, just crossed the room and sat beside her. "I talked to Ethan," he said after a moment. Her heart leapt. "And? He's upset," Aaron admitted, "but he's not going to say anything to anyone else. He just needs time." Relief washed over her, but it was quickly replaced by a new wave of guilt. "I hate that this is tearing everything apart." Aaron reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "This doesn't have to be the end of anything," he said softly. "We can figure out a way to move forward." Before she could respond, he leaned in, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was slow and deliberate, filled with all the emotions they had been struggling to contain. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of a throat clearing. They pulled apart abruptly, turning to see Ethan standing in the hallway, his expression unreadable. "Ethan," Olivia began, her voice trembling. He raised a hand, silencing her. "Save it," he said, his tone icy. "I just needed water." As he disappeared into the kitchen, Olivia's chest tightened. She turned to Aaron, her voice filled with panic. "What if he changes his mind? What if he tells someone?" Aaron's expression was calm but serious. "He won't," he said confidently. But even if he does, we'll deal with it, together. As the night stretched on, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that their secret was spiraling out of control, and the consequences were far from over. The house had gone completely silent as the clock ticked past midnight. Olivia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts spinning out of control. Ethan's cold expression, Aaron's steady reassurances, and her own guilt swirled together, making sleep impossible. A soft knock on her door made her heart skip. She sat up, her breath catching as the door creaked open. Aaron stepped inside, closing it quietly behind him. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I needed to see you," he said, his voice low and filled with urgency. "I can't stop thinking about you, Olivia. I won't pretend this didn't happen." Her pulse quickened as he approached, his presence filling the room. "Aaron, this is dangerous. If Ethan finds out, he already knows," he interrupted, his tone calm but firm. "And we're already in this. There's no going back now." He sat on the edge of her bed, his eyes searching hers. "Tell me to leave, and I will. But if you feel what I feel, don't push me away." Olivia's breath hitched as she struggled to find her voice. She knew she should send him away, end this madness before it spiraled further out of control. But the intensity in his gaze, the warmth of his hand brushing hers, made it impossible. "I hate that you make this so hard," she murmured, her voice trembling. "And I hate that I can't stop wanting you," he replied, his tone thick with emotion. Before she could respond, Aaron leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss that was slow and deliberate, filled with all the emotions they had been fighting for weeks. The kiss deepened as their restraint crumbled. Aaron's hands slid to her waist, pulling her closer as Olivia's fingers tangled in his hair. The tension that had been building between them erupted, leaving no room for doubt or hesitation. "You're impossible," she whispered against his lips, her voice shaky. "And you're unforgettable," he replied, his breath warm against her skin. The quiet of the house wrapped around them like a cocoon as they surrendered to the connection they could no longer deny. Every touch, every whispered word felt electric, a dangerous mix of passion and longing that neither of them could resist. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the curtains, Olivia stirred, her heart heavy with the weight of what they had done. She turned to find Aaron sitting on the edge of the bed, his expression serious but calm. "We need to talk," he said softly. Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. Her door creaked open, and Ethan stood there, his face unreadable. "I figured," Ethan said, his tone flat, but his eyes betraying a mix of hurt and anger. "You couldn't even wait a day, could you?" Olivia's chest tightened as Aaron stood, his voice calm but firm. "Ethan, this isn't about you. It's about us." "Us?" Ethan's voice cracked as he let out a bitter laugh. "You think this is an us thing? You're breaking every rule, every bit of trust we had." "I know," Aaron admitted, his tone steady. "And I'm sorry, but I'm not walking away from her." Ethan's gaze shifted to Olivia, his expression softening slightly. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly before turning and walking away. As the door clicked shut, Olivia let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling. "This is a disaster," she whispered. Aaron pulled her into his arms, his grip steady and reassuring. "Maybe," he said softly, "but I don't regret it, not for a second." As the morning unfolded, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The consequences of their choices loomed over them like a storm, but one thing was clear: they couldn't undo what had happened, and neither of them wanted to.